Describe the first day you went to school that you remember. This is a full ielts speaking Part 2 and Part 3 walkthrough at Band 9 Standard. Welcome back to Master 79. Here's the plan. We'll take the cue card apart, build a 60-second note plan, deliver a full 2-minute Part 2 answer, and then work through all 6 Part 3 questions with brainstorming and model answers. One quick note on the models. They use an invented candidate. Copy the technique, never the content. Examiners reward your own detail, not a memorized story. First, the format. The examiner hands you a card with a topic and 3 or 4 prompts. You get 1 minute to prepare with paper and a pencil. You then speak for 1 to 2 minutes without interruption. The examiner stops you at 2 minutes, and that is a good sign. It means you had enough to say. Here is the card. Describe the first day you went to school that you remember. You should say when it happened, where the school is, and how you felt about the experience. And explain why you still remember the experience. Take a moment to read it. Now the method. The 60-second note plan. Write the 4 bullets down the page, 1 line of keywords each, never full sentences. Add 1 sensory detail to each bullet, a color, a smell, a sound. That single habit is what makes a story sound true rather than rehearsed. Decide your last sentence before you start so you land the answer instead of trailing off. And plan to still be talking at 2 minutes. Here are the notes for the first 2 bullets. Notice how short they are. When early September, age 6, about 15 years ago, and the sense detail, it rained overnight so the yard smelled of wet concrete. Where in Go Queen Primary on the outskirts of Haiphong, a 10-minute walk from home, 2 low yellow buildings and an enormous flame tree in the courtyard. Now the feelings bullet and the explain line. The key decision here is torn, 2 feelings, not 1. Excited first, then terrified. And for why I remember, the teacher crouched to eye level and asked about a bee hearing instead of the crying. The last line is already written down. That is the sentence you land on. Before we speak, here is the language we are aiming to use. These are not decorations. Each one is doing a job, either narrating, contrasting, or reflecting.
I'd like to talk about my very first day at primary school, which is honestly one of the earliest memories I can still picture clearly. It happened in early September, back when I was 6, so roughly 15 years ago. It had rained heavily the night before, so the whole yard smelled of wet concrete. The school is called Ngo Queen Primary, and it's on the outskirts of Haiphong, about a 10-minute walk from the house I grew up in. It's not a big place at all, just 2 low yellow buildings arranged around a courtyard with an enormous flame tree in the middle. That tree is the thing I remember most vividly. As for how I felt, I was completely torn. On the one hand, I'd been looking forward to it for weeks. My mother had bought me a red backpack that was almost as big as I was, and I'd insisted on wearing it around the house for days beforehand. But the moment we got through the gate and I saw hundreds of children I didn't know, all the excitement drained away and I was absolutely terrified. I clung to my mother's hand and flatly refused to let go. What turned it around was my teacher. She crouched down to my eye level, and instead of telling me to stop crying, she asked me about the little BQ and hanging off my bag. And that was it. I was fine after that. That's really why the day has stuck with me. It wasn't the lessons or the classroom. It was discovering that being frightened of something doesn't mean you can't do it. I've fallen back on that a lot since, especially before big exams.
Here is the whole answer in one place. Pause the video and read it through. Then read it aloud once, timing yourself, and see where your own version runs short. That's part 2. Now part 3. This is a 4 to 5 minute discussion, and it turns abstract. The questions are no longer about you, they are about people in general. Aim for roughly 40 to 90 words. Give a position, a reason, then an example or a concession. And hedge, because hedging is rewarded here, not penalized. One honest note before we start about the question sheet itself. The part 3 list here covers 2 unrelated themes. Questions 1 to 3 are about changing jobs. Questions 4 to 6 are about children starting school and socializing. In a real test, part 3 grows out of your part 2 topic, so only questions 4 to 6 actually follow from this cue card. We're showing the list exactly as printed and answering all 6 in full. Question 1. What are the reasons for job change? 3 ideas ranked. Pay, because a competitor will offer more for identical skills. Stagnation, when you stop learning. And management, the old line that people leave managers, not jobs.
Several, I'd say, and they are not all financial. The obvious one is pay, since a competitor will often offer more for exactly the same skills. But the more common driver, in my experience, is stagnation. You reach a point where you're not learning anything new, and that's genuinely demoralizing. Then there's management. There's a saying that people don't leave jobs, they leave managers, and I think there's a lot of truth in that.
Question 2. Are big companies better than small companies? Careful with this one. It looks like a yes or no question, but the strong answer refuses the false choice first and then still commits. Big means security and training. Small means responsibility and visible impact.
It really depends what you're optimizing for. Large companies offer obvious advantages: job security, structured training, a recognizable name on your CV. But they can be bureaucratic, and it's easy to feel like a very small cog in a very large machine. Smaller firms tend to hand you real responsibility much earlier, and you can actually see the impact of your work. So I wouldn't say one is objectively better. Big companies suit people who want stability. Small ones suit people who want ownership.
Question 3. The advantages and disadvantages of changing jobs. A two-sided question needs 2 genuine sides, so plan one of each before you speak. Faster pay rises and a wider network against lost goodwill and looking like a flight risk.
On the plus side, moving is usually the fastest way to raise your salary, because internal pay rises rarely keep pace with what the open market will offer. It also broadens your skill set and widens your professional network. The drawback is that you forfeit accumulated goodwill. You built heart trust and you know how everything works, and you have to start from scratch. And if you move too frequently, Employees may start to see you as a flight risk.
Question 4. What would parents prepare for their kids when they first go to school? The obvious answer is the uniform and the stationery. The strong answer concedes that, then upgrades it to the emotional preparation. Watch for the pivot phrase, "they're the easy part."
Parents tend to focus on the practical side, the uniform, the stationery, the lunchbox, and those things matter, but they're the easy part. The preparation that really counts is emotional. Talking the child through what the day will actually look like, so nothing comes as a shock. Teaching them small independent skills, like doing up their own shoes, and managing their own nerves, frankly, because children read their parents very accurately. If the parent looks anxious, the child will be too.
Question 5. How do children socialize with each other? Answer this developmentally in stages. First, side-by-side play with very little talking. Then rule-based games where negotiating and losing get learned. And then the modern shift online.
Mainly through play rather than conversation, which is the big difference from adults. Very young children will sit side by side doing the same activity without really talking to each other. That's usually the first stage. As they get older, shared games with rules take over, and that's where they learn to negotiate, take turns, and cope with losing. And nowadays, there's an online dimension too. A lot of 10 and 11-year-olds socialize through games rather than in the playground.
Question 6. Is socialization important for children? Commit immediately, then justify. And notice the hedge in the model answer. Where a weaker candidate invents a statistic, a band 9 candidate says, "My impression is."
Absolutely, and I'd argue it's at least as important as anything they learn academically. School isn't only about literacy and numeracy. It's the first place a child has to negotiate with people who aren't family, and that's where they pick up empathy, cooperation, and how to settle a disagreement without an adult stepping in. My impression is that children who struggle socially early often find it harder later, both at work and in relationships. So it isn't a soft extra. It's foundational.
Here is the full language bank from this lesson. Do not try to memorize all of it. Choose 4 phrases and use each one 3 times this week until it stops feeling borrowed. Why this performance sits at band 9. Fluency and coherence. It runs at length without visible effort and follows a plan you can hear. Lexical resource. The collocation is precise and the idiom is used without strain. Grammatical range. Past perfect, contrast and conditionals appear naturally, not as showpieces. And pronunciation. It stays easy to follow throughout. One important caveat. Band 9 here is our own quality assessment against the public ielts band descriptors. It is not a certified examiner score, and no band can be guaranteed. Your turn. Set a timer for 1 minute and write your own 4-bullet plan. Then record 2 full minutes without stopping. Listen back twice, once for content and once only for grammar. And post your last line in the comments because that is the sentence almost nobody plans. Thanks for watching Master 79.